What if I told you that a single symbol, drawn with nothing more than a pen on paper, could shatter everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world around you? Picture this, it's 1916 and Carl Jung, lost in his own turbulent mind, dreams of a radiant, intricate circle. When he wakes, he doesn't reach for another dream journal quote or a stream of consciousness passage. Instead, he draws that glowing mandala, curious if it means nothing or everything. The moment his pen traces that curve, the haze in his thoughts clears. Jung later called that mandala his psychic blueprint, the key that guided him toward a deeper understanding of his own psyche, and it still raises a chilling question. Could one symbol really rewrite your reality too? You might be skeptical. After all, we live in an age of words, tweets, blogs, headlines, everything shouting for attention. But symbols dance beneath the surface, speaking a language older than any door-knock advertising. They aren't just doodles or art. They are living keys to hidden chambers of your mind. Think about that for a moment. A circle, a spiral, an interlocking triangle. Something as simple as lines and shapes can carry a message that bypasses your conscious filter and reaches straight for your gut, your instinct, your deepest self. Back in Jung's time, his patients were arriving at his office confused, torn between conflicting desires they couldn't even name. He was searching for a way to map the unseen terrain of the human soul, until that mandala arrived. He described it as more than a drawing. It was a revelation. He felt pulled into that circle as if it held everything he'd ever repressed and everything he had yet to become. From that point on, Jung studied mandalas obsessively, capturing more dream images of circles, spirals, and concentric shapes, realizing they appeared whenever his mind was on the cusp of some breakthrough. In a way, this symbol became a doorway, a living instruction manual for navigating the labyrinth of the psyche. But let's not give away too much just yet. The real mystery lies in what happened next. Jung noticed that his patients, when asked to draw mandalas, often created their own versions, unique patterns that seemed to pulse with personal meaning. One patient, on the verge of a nervous breakdown, produced a spiraling shape that, when interpreted, revealed the precise conflict haunting her, an unspoken grief buried so deep she hadn't realized it was there. The symbol didn't just diagnose her, it offered a path toward healing, and for Jung it became clear that mandalas weren't confined to his office. They were universal. Ancient cultures from India to Native American tribes used circular motifs to represent cosmic order, wholeness, and the dance between the known and the unknown. So when you come across something as unassuming as a circle or a spiral, pay attention. There's a chance you're standing on the edge of something enormous, an invitation to explore parts of yourself you've never met. Maybe you saw an image online, a simple mandala pattern, and felt a strange pull, like it was calling you to sit down with paper and pencil, to draw, to stare until your fingers tingle. That tug is no accident. It's the silent hum of a symbol working its way into your unconscious, nudging you toward a revelation you might not even know you need. Now imagine you're holding a pen. You draw a circle. That circle becomes more than ink on a page. It becomes a mirror reflecting your inner landscape. You might see fears you've avoided, dreams you've hidden, hopes you've forgotten. Maybe the symbol shimmers with possibilities you can't yet articulate. You don't need a degree in psychology to feel its power. You just need the courage to trace that line, to let the symbol awaken something in you. So here's the real question. If that one circle changed Carl Jung's entire life, and countless others who stumbled upon their own mandalas, what could it do for you? Could a single symbol drawn in ink sketch a whole new path forward? Could it unravel the threads of doubt, fear, or confusion that have held you hostage? I don't have the answer. At least not yet. But I promise you this. By the end of our journey together, you'll never look at a simple shape the same way again. And you might just be compelled to pick up a pen, draw a line, and take that first step into a world where one symbol has the power to rewrite your reality. The moment you realize that symbols can rewrite your reality, it's only natural to wonder, how did our ancestors wield this power, long before Jung's mandalas made their way onto notebooks? In a world without Google searches or smartphone screens, symbols were the secret ink coursing beneath the surface of civilization, carrying whispers of lost wisdom and forbidden knowledge. They were never just doodles. They were codes, promises, warnings, and keys, all rolled into shapes that could survive the collapse of empires. To truly grasp their potency, we must travel back to a time when entire traditions hinged on lines, curves, and geometry. Welcome to an age when symbols were the world's secret language. Imagine a dusty scriptorium in 13th century Baghdad, where scholars huddle over fragile manuscripts by candlelight. The atmosphere is thick with the scent of parchment, and outside the call to prayer echoes across narrow alleyways. These scribes are translating fragments of earlier Greek and Persian texts. Philosophers' musings on the nature of reality, alchemists' recipes for transmuting base metals into gold, astrologers' charts that claim to predict a newborn's destiny. But between the lines of plain text lie symbols so arcane that only those initiated into secret brotherhoods can decipher them. A strange character appears, perhaps a composite of a circle and a square. No footnote explains it. Yet to an initiate, this glyph signifies the union of opposites, the marriage of spirit and matter. A peasant passing by would see only an odd sketch. A scholar in the know would see a roadmap to enlightenment. Fast forward to Renaissance Italy, where the clash of art and science is reshaping Western thought. Florence pulses with creativity. Michelangelo chiseling marble, Galileo peering at the heavens, and in his cluttered workshop, Leonardo da Vinci scribbling with frenetic energy. But here's the twist. Leonardo doesn't want just anyone reading his genius. He's convinced that his insights are too precious and too dangerous to be left unguarded. So he writes backwards. The famous mirror script that fills countless pages of his notebooks isn't an accident or mere quirk. It's a deliberate encryption. With every stroke of his pen, Leonardo hides his inventions, automata, flying machines, anatomical diagrams, behind a veil of mystery. Only someone who holds his notebook up to a mirror can read the words clearly. Imagine stumbling on one of these pages without that key. You'd see nothing but a jumble of backwards letters, interspersed with cryptic diagrams, lines that might be mechanical sketches or esoteric sigils. To decode the pattern, you need to be in the know, part of an inner circle that recognizes which symbols unlock which secrets. His method wasn't born of paranoia alone. It was also a philosophical statement. Leonardo believed that knowledge itself is living, an organic force that, when mishandled, can corrupt or destroy. By hiding his work behind symbols, he ensured that only those who were willing to learn the language could access the flame. It's said that even his closest companions could barely keep up with the swirling webs of sketches and backward prose. When Leonardo mapped out the plan for his flying machine, the drawing was accompanied by a series of odd geometric shapes and ciphered annotations. Anyone naive enough to replicate his work without understanding the hidden notes risked disaster. Wings might collapse mid-air, or unstable contraptions could explode. In that sense, Leonardo's mirror writing was more than a barrier. It was a gatekeeper, ensuring that knowledge remained sacred and protected. But Leonardo's workshop was only one node in a vast network of secret wisdom keepers. Across the globe, from the remote mountain monasteries of Tibet to the stone altars of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, symbols formed a common currency. In ancient Egypt, priests etched hieroglyphs onto temple walls, encoding their observations of the stars and the cycles of the Nile. These hieroglyphs were not just decorative. Each symbol carried a mythic resonance. Isis, Osiris, and Horus lived and died in these carved images, weaving a narrative that explained life, death, and resurrection. To the uninitiated, they resembled pictures of birds and snakes, but to the initiated, they conveyed philosophical doctrines and initiation rites. The walls themselves functioned as massive teaching tools. Follow the serpent's path, align yourself with the falcon god, and you unlock the mysteries of rebirth. Meanwhile, further east, a secret order of Taoist alchemists in the Wudang Mountains developed their own symbolic arsenal. In scrolls that survived invasions and natural disasters, they sketched circles within squares and triangles overlapping, in complex patterns, each shape corresponding to an element, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and a transformative process, e.g., such as refining mercury into white elixir. These symbols were more than mere diagrams for laboratory recipes. They were maps of inner transformation. The alchemists believed that drawing these shapes in meditation could align one's ki or vital energy with the pulse of the universe. Just as in Jung's time, a simple sketch could serve as a psychic blueprint, but here it was layered with the promise of immortality, at least in a spiritual sense. Bloodlines of secret societies like the Rosicrucians and Knights Templar flourished in medieval Europe, and their members exchanged arcane symbols in cryptic letters. A Templar knight might hide a coded message in the carved tracery of a Gothic cathedral, accessible only to those who knew which symbols to seek. A Rosicrucian manuscript might include a flower-like geometric pattern that, when decoded, revealed a spiritual formula for transcending the material world. Over centuries, these orders guarded their symbols jealously, passing them from one initiatory circle to the next. By the Renaissance, their influence spread to artists, philosophers, and early scientists who began scattering symbolic references through their works, much like an Easter egg for those attuned to the hidden language. And then there are the texts that vanished altogether, books too dangerous or too esoteric to survive the sweep of history. Codices full of arcane symbols, rumored to contain alchemical formulas for philosopher's stone, or rituals to induce prophetic visions, were burned or buried when regimes shifted. What remains of these lost tomes are fragments, references in other authors' works, scraps of parchment tucked into monastery archives, half-hidden codes in paintings that modern scholars still debate. When a single papyrus scroll pops up centuries later, scholars scramble to decipher the symbols before they disintegrate. Often they discover that a seemingly innocuous diagram, a circle intersecting a square, was actually a detailed plan for a ritual to commune with the divine. The loss of the rest of the text leaves us with tantalizing clues, but no complete picture, like a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. Why were these symbols buried, hidden, or forgotten? Sometimes it was political. The Church feared that certain knowledge could undermine its authority. Sometimes it was practical. In times of war or plague, those who possessed special knowledge risked being accused of witchcraft or heresy. Other times it was a matter of preservation. Scribes wrote in symbols to protect their work from decay or theft, believing that a direct message in plain language would attract unwanted attention. In all cases, symbols served as both lock and key. They offered a path to unimaginable wisdom, but only to those willing to learn the secret language. So when you next encounter a curious geometric shape, or an ambiguous glyph in an ancient text, or even a modern tattoo, recognize that you're looking at something far deeper than art. You're gazing at a whisper from the past, an echo of minds that understood the universe not as a random jumble, but as an intricate tapestry woven from symbols. Leonardo's mirror writing is just one example of how these codes protected and preserved transformative knowledge. But the legacy stretches back millennia, spanning continents and cultures, each with its unique flavor of secrecy, each with its hidden map to hidden realms. In our next chapter, we'll delve into one of the most iconic of these ancient symbols, the Ouroboros. A serpent devouring its own tail might seem like a simple illustration, but its history and implications are as winding as the loop itself. How did that image become the ultimate representation of life's cycles? And what can it teach you about the loops you're stuck in today? Stay with me, because the world of symbols has only begun to reveal itself. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The last time we left off, we saw how symbols have carried hidden knowledge across centuries, encoded in mirror writing, whispered among secret orders, and etched into fragments of lost tomes. Now imagine for a moment that you stumble upon one of those fragments, a simple drawing of a serpent, its body curled into a perfect circle as it devours its own tail. You tilt the parchment under flickering lamplight and suddenly feel something shift inside you, as if you've unlocked a door that's always been waiting for you. This image, the Ouroboros, may look like a curious doodle, but its resonance has echoed through millennia, challenging philosophers, mystics, and seekers to confront an unsettling question. Are we doomed to repeat our lives over and over, or can we transcend the very cycles we inhabit? The earliest known depiction of the Ouroboros appears in ancient Egyptian funerary texts, where the serpent symbol wraps around the heavens, encircling the sun god Ra as he sails through the underworld each night. But it wasn't until the Hellenistic period that philosophers began to contemplate its deeper meaning. Fast forward to the 2nd century AD, and you'll find Cleopatra's library in Alexandria, where alchemists copied Greek treatises that describe the Ouroboros as the one who bites its tail, a cosmic principle of unity and self-renewal. Those alchemists believed that the serpent mirrored the process of turning lead into gold, death into rebirth. To them, every time the serpent took its own tail, it demonstrated that endings are merely beginnings in disguise. Centuries later, Friedrich Nietzsche would stand on a mountain ledge and ask a question so profound that it haunted generations of thinkers. If you had to live this life exactly as it is, down to every sorrow, every joy, over and over for eternity, would you curse the eternal return or embrace it? Nietzsche didn't draw the Ouroboros himself, but his concept of eternal recurrence captures its essence perfectly. He imagined life as an infinite loop, a cosmic feedback loop where every choice you make will be replayed an endless number of times. Think about that. Every childhood memory, every heartbreak, every triumph repeated ad infinitum. Nietzsche's vision was not a cheerful one. He wanted us to realize the weight of our existence and decide whether we can affirm life in all its suffering and beauty. Back in Jung's time, when he studied that glowing mandala in 1916, he recognized the Ouroboros tucked discreetly into many Eastern and Western designs. He understood that mandalas aren't just circles, they're dynamic maps of eternity. A mandala in Jung's mind is an inner Ouroboros. It signifies the cyclical journey of the self toward wholeness. When his patients drew mandalas during sessions, their spirals and concentric shapes often mirrored the pattern of the serpent. Jung felt compelled to tell them, your psyche is telling you a story. You're caught in a loop, and only by acknowledging it can you emerge transformed. Take, for instance, a patient of Jung's named Sabina Spielrein, a remarkable woman who would later become one of the first female psychoanalysts. While under Jung's care, she scrawled a complex mandala that included a serpent coiled around a flower. When Jung interpreted it, he realized Sabina was wrestling with a repeated pattern of dependency and self-destruction. Every time she felt close to someone, she retreated into emotional withdrawal like a snake devouring its own tail. She couldn't see the cycle until she drew it. Once Sabina recognized the Ouroboros in her own psyche, she began to break the loop, moving from self-destruction toward a life of insight and purpose. Her story shows how symbols can illuminate the very cycles that ensnare us. But let's pull back for a moment. Why do cycles feel so inescapable? Why do we keep making the same mistakes or falling into similar emotional traps? It's partly because we live in a linear culture. We talk about getting ahead, moving forward, and climbing the ladder. Yet deep down, much of life moves in circles. Seasons come and go, economies boom and bust, relationships rise and fall. The snake reminds us that what appears as progress may just be repetition. A job promotion might be a new ring around the same neck. a new relationship, a familiar echo of an old pattern. By tracing the serpent's curve, you peer into your own history, into shadows you might have tried to escape, only to find that running away still keeps you in the circle. Now imagine you sit down with pen and paper. You've heard all the stories, Jung's mandalas, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, Sabina Spielrein's transformational breakthrough, but none of it means anything until you draw your own Ouroboros. You sketch a snake's head, then curve its body around until the tail meets the mouth. The moment you close that circle, something pulses in your chest. You find yourself thinking of a relationship that ended badly, yet keeps echoing in your dreams. You think of a creative project you started passionately, only to abandon at the first sign of struggle. The symbol has become a mirror. It shows you that the thing you thought was linear, like heartbreak or failure, is part of a much larger loop. And here's where the real magic happens. Once you see the loop, you can step outside it. Think of a clock. When you stand inside a clock's radius, you're just another number ticking away. But if you climb onto the wall behind that clock, the hands don't hold you. They spin around a center, revealing the mechanism that runs the whole show. Drawing the Ouroboros is like climbing behind the clock. You witness the cycle from a vantage point that wasn't visible before. You see that the same energies driving your patterns can also fuel your transformation. The serpent's tail isn't a trap. It's the key to break the trap. But let's not pretend this is easy. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence isn't a warm blanket of consolation. It's a challenge to live each moment with such awareness that you would gladly replay it forever, not because the cycle is pleasant, but because you've embraced it fully. His idea pushes you to face your darkest moments head-on, to infuse even your sorrows with gratitude, because each moment of pain carries lessons you'll need if you do indeed relive your entire life. It's a terrifying thought, a life sentence of every joy and every regret. Yet it's also an invitation to live more courageously, to infuse your thoughts and actions with meaning that transcends the loop. In practical terms, acknowledging your Ouroboros moment means asking difficult questions. What patterns do I keep repeating at work? Why do I find myself in relationships that mirror past trauma? When I feel stuck, how do I usually respond? When you ask those questions while your eyes are fixed on the Ouroboros you drew, the lines of the symbol become pathways in your mind. You trace them and see where you've been. You see how grief and longing lead you back to the same dead ends. But then you notice something else. Every time the snake bites its tail, the circle isn't closed perfectly. There's a small gap, a break in the scales where transformation can slip through. That gap is a portal. It's where you can exit the cycle. Perhaps you decide that this time, when the familiar pattern emerges, you'll pause and breathe instead of reacting on autopilot. Maybe you remember a journal entry from years ago where you described a dream of flying free. It stirs you now to ask, what if I can rewrite this scene? Can I write a different ending to that old story? Nietzsche would remind you that by embracing the trial of eternal recurrence, you transform suffering into art. Jung would nod, knowing that the mandala or the Ouroboros doesn't promise to keep you in darkness. It shows you the path out of it. So when you next feel the pull of a pattern, when you realize you're circling back to a well-worn wound, draw the serpent. Watch as it completes the loop. Acknowledge the weight of that return and then look for the gap. Dare to step through, because once you've seen the loop from both inside and out, you have a choice: to keep orbiting the same misery, or to leap into the unknown space beyond the snake's tail, forging a brand new trajectory. In our next chapter, we'll ascend from the depths of life's cycles to the heights of consciousness itself, exploring a symbol that promises not just rebirth, but a cosmic roadmap, the Tree of Life. But before we climb, remember this. Each time a cycle threatens to swallow you whole, there's an Ouroboros waiting to be drawn, a reminder that endings are beginnings, and that your next revolution could be your last. The moment you trace the Ouroboros and glimpse the gap where cycles break, You become acutely aware that life isn't just a loop of endless repetition. It's also a ladder that can lift you into different states of being. But what if that ladder isn't vertical at all? What if it's a sprawling network of pathways, each leading to a different facet of your soul? That is the promise and the challenge of the Tree of Life. While the Ouroboros shows us how we circle, the tree tells us where we might ascend. It is less a symbol of return and more a map of potential, a cartography of consciousness itself. To truly see it, we must leave the serpent's tunnel and stand at the base of a living tree whose roots reach into the underworld and whose branches pierce the heavens. In the 16th century, in the dimly lit study of Saft, a hillside village that had become a hub for Jewish mystics, Rabbi Isaac Luria, known simply as the Uri, slipped into a profound trance. He claimed to see not a static diagram, but a living structure. 10 glowing spheres connected by 22 shimmering paths, each one pulsing with an almost sentient energy. Luria's vision didn't stop at the drawing. He described wandering through the spheres as though walking across a cosmic bridge, each step revealing a new layer of divine reality. His students said that during his trance, the very air in the room changed, as if the geometry of the tree opened a doorway to something that existed beyond time. When Luria awoke, he sketched what he saw, the luminous Sephirot arranged from Keter, the crown of pure unity, all the way down to Malkuth, the kingdom of manifest reality. From that moment forward, the Tree of Life became more than a mystical diagram. It became a living blueprint for anyone brave enough to traverse it. But what is this tree really? On its surface, it appears as an abstract diagram, 10 circles or sephirot, linked by delicate lines that form a network of 22 paths. Each sephira represents a facet of divine consciousness, attributes like wisdom, compassion, beauty, and sovereignty. The lines between them are not mere connectors. They are the highways along which spiritual energy flows. When you stare at Luria's sketch, you might notice that Keter sits at the very top, a sphere of radiant white light that symbolizes the infinite source beyond comprehension. Below it, Chokmah, wisdom, and Bina, understanding, stand like twin pillars supporting the entire structure, while at the very bottom, Malkuth anchors the tree to the earth, signifying the physical world we inhabit. Every sphere and path is a doorway, a destination in itself, and a junction to other facets of the divine. Let's walk through a few of these spheres to understand their hidden power. Imagine standing at Malkuth, the realm of the material. This is where we begin. In the everyday world of work, family, and bills, Malkuth is about earth, timeliness, and the basic facts of existence. You might shrug and think, so what? I already know I live in the world. But here's where the tree's magic begins. Malkuth is not a place to stay. It's a point of departure. From there you can ascend the path to Yesod, the sphere of foundation which deals with imagination, dreams, and the subconscious. Yesod is the bridge between the tangible and the invisible. Here a whispered intuition or a vivid dream can become the spark that pulls you upward. Draw a vertical line from Malkuth to Yesod, and you witness the transformation of daily experience into psychic awareness. Above Yesod sits Tiferet, the sphere of beauty and compassion. Tiferet is the heart center of the tree, a place where the divine and the human meet in harmonious dance. It is often depicted at the center of the diagram, balancing mercy and judgment, akin to a cosmic sun radiating warmth. When a seeker meditates on Tiferet, they encounter a profound sense of interconnection, an experience of beauty that transcends mere aesthetics, revealing a unity that binds all existence. But it doesn't stop there. Above Tiferet is Hesed, the sphere of boundless love and generosity, and Gevurah, the sphere of discipline and strength. Each of these operates as a counterbalance. Hesed without Gevurah becomes chaotic benevolence, while Gevurah without Hesed risks rigid austerity. The tree teaches that true spiritual growth arises not from extremes, but from the delicate dance between opposites. Climbing further, we reach Bina, the sphere of understanding, and Chokhmah, the sphere of wisdom. Chokhmah is a flash of pure insight, a lightning strike of clarity. Bina is the womb in which that insight ripens, unfolding layers of nuance and meaning. Together, they channel the creative force that gave rise to existence itself. If you can stand in Bina, you feel the tension of potential and the weight of responsibility. Understanding is not just knowing, but knowing what to do with knowledge. Then, perched at the very apex, is Kheta. Kheta is beyond description, a point of pure being that defies language. To reach Kheta is to brush against the infinite, to sense the divine spark that animates all life. Luria's vision suggested that Kheta is the source from which all other spheres shine, like a prism that refracts the light of God into 10 colors, each manifesting as a sephira. Yet the tree of life is not a ladder that only moves upward. It is a network, a web of interlocking pathways that hint at multiple routes to the same destination, and sometimes detours that lead to unexpected insights. Consider the path between Hesed and Gevurah. A seeker might feel drawn to Hesed's loving embrace, only to realize that without Gevurah's discipline, their compassion can become diffused and directionless. Or someone might linger too long in Chokhmah's spark of inspiration, neglecting Bina's steady hand of comprehension, and find their ideas beautiful but unstable. The tree invites you to observe where you cluster, where you get stuck in your own psyche, and encourages you to shift your attention to another path, so that your entire being remains balanced. But as with any profound symbol, misconceptions abound. Some dismiss the tree of life as a relic of medieval fantasy. Why look at a geeky diagram when we have science to tell us how the brain works? Others use it as a surface-level backdrop for Instagram selfies, slapping a spiritual label on any vaguely geometric art. Yet neither extreme does justice to its depth. The tree is not a parlor trick, nor is it a simplistic pop culture meme. It is a multidimensional language, a system of correspondences that touches Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, and psychology. To misuse it, to reduce it to a trendy motif, is to miss its power. But to dive in with discipline and humility is to encounter a mirror of your soul. Let's address a few common myths. First, the idea that you must believe in Jewish mysticism to benefit from the tree. In reality, the tree's wisdom transcends creed. A Christian mystic like Jacob Boehme found in it echoes of the Trinity. A Sufi poet might see reflections of the divine names of Allah in the Sephirot. The tree's symbolism aligns with universal patterns, the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm, the fractal nature of reality, the idea that each level of existence contains the whole. You don't need to recite Hebrew words or light a candle in a synagogue. You simply need to engage with the tree's structure, meditating on its spheres and paths with honest intention. Second, there's a misconception that the tree is a static diagram, like a poster you hang on the wall and glance at once in a while. But Luria's vision emphatically contradicts that. He taught that the tree is a living organism, one that unfolds in layers. There is the lower face of the tree, which shows the visible sephirot we just described. Then there is the upper face, an even more hidden reality that includes Da'at, a mysterious hidden sephira sometimes called the 11th sphere. Da'at represents knowledge, but not intellectual knowledge. Rather, it is the moment of unity when wisdom, Chokhmah, and understanding, Bina, merge. It is the place where knowing transcends knowing, a threshold experience of direct contact with the divine. Luria said that when a seeker meditates deeply on Da'at, they experience a glimpse of the Ein Sof, the infinite without end that lies beyond Keter. Few mortals can stay in that space for long. It's as if staring directly into the sun of creation itself. Then there's the backside of the tree, a face that shows the forces of fragmentation and exile. In Kabbalistic lore, when the divine light initially descended into the Sephirot, it was too powerful for the vessels meant to contain it. The vessels shattered, scattering divine sparks throughout the cosmos. This event, known as Shevirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels, introduced a fracture in reality. Thus, the tree of life also contains within it a tree of death, a mirror image of devastation that explains why the world feels broken. Luria's followers believed that their mission was tikkun, or repair, to gather those scattered sparks and restore harmony to the universe. That grand vision transformed Kabbalah into a cosmic rehabilitation plan, where every meditative act, prayer, or ethical deed contributes to repairing the world. The tree is thus a map of both wholeness and the fragments that must be healed. Let's bring all of this into practical terms. How does one actually use the tree of life to awaken to these layers? One accessible path begins with the practice of visual tracing. You draw the tree on a piece of paper, 10 circles connected by lines in the familiar pattern, and hold that image in your mind's eye. As you breathe slowly, you focus on Malkuth at the base, imagining roots sinking into the earth, grounding you in reality. Then, with each inhale, you imagine a beam of divine light traveling upward to Yesod, filling your imagination with vivid symbols. You pause there, noticing any emotions or images that arise. On the next breath, you continue to Tiferet, inviting a sense of compassion to flood your heart. Rather than rushing, you linger at each sphere, allowing it to reveal its secret. Hyasid whispers unconditional love. Gevura speaks of disciplined courage. Tiferet illuminates harmony. Binah unfolds understanding in a gentle, maternal way. Chokmah flashes pure inspiration. And finally, Keter reminds you of the infinite source pulsing behind it all. If you feel ready, you might attempt to glimpse Da'at, the hidden junction, where knowledge becomes unity, even if only for a heartbeat. Then, with each exhale, you guide the light back down through the spheres, returning to Malkuth, anchoring those higher energies in your everyday life. Another approach is contemplative journaling. You begin with a question such as, what does kindness look like in my world? You locate Hesed on your paper and write there. Then you wonder, what does discipline mean to me? And move to Gevura, allowing each question to draw you upward. By the time you reach Chokmah, you may find ideas swirling like sparks of lightning. In Binah, you crystallize those sparks into sentences that carry weight. This process turns the tree into a scaffold for your own self-inquiry, each sphere acting as a station where you pause, reflect, and integrate. Throughout this journey, it's crucial to remain aware of pitfalls. One common mistake is to treat the tree as a checklist. Okay, I hit Hesed today. Check. Now on to Gevura. That reduces the experience to shallow box ticking. Instead, consider that each sapphira is not a discrete compartment, but a wave in an ocean of consciousness. Another trap is to chase dazzle, seeking only Kita's blinding light while ignoring Malkuth's grounding pull. If you ascend too quickly without proper footing, you risk becoming untethered, lost in abstract mysticism with no anchor in everyday reality. The ideal path is both reverent and grounded. You honor Kita's transcendent fire, but you always carry its warmth into your daily life, warming the soil of Malkuth so that your actions mirror your insights. There's also a subtle edge. As you climb the tree, you may encounter voices of doubt. Who am I to perceive the highest realms? Or what if I make a mistake and unleash chaos in my psyche? These are not fatal errors, but protective warnings. The very act of climbing can stir energies that need to be integrated carefully. If you rush, you might experience what Kabbalists call klipot, shells of negativity that can attach themselves like shadows to your progress. But if you respect the tree's architecture, pausing at each sphere, offering gratitude for each lesson, the path remains clear. One more captivating insight. The tree of life is mirrored in many traditions, sometimes under different names. In Hindu Tantra, there is the concept of the Kundalini rising through chakras, each chakra resonating with similar themes: rooting, creativity, power, love, communication, intuition, and onto cosmic connection. In Sufi mysticism, The journey toward the divine mirrors the tree's ascent through stations of the heart. Even modern psychology has adopted this model. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs resembles a truncated tree, with physiological needs at the base and self-actualization perched near the top. These parallels remind us that the tree of life is not a relic of antiquity, but a living symbol whose branches extend into countless cultures and disciplines. So where does this take you? Having walked the winding paths of the tree, you now stand at a crossroads. Do you return to Malkuth, carrying with you the love of Hesed, the discipline of Gevurah, the compassion of Tiferet? Or do you venture into the hidden realms of Da'at, risking the disorientation of standing face to face with the infinite? The choice is yours. Some seekers find that a lifetime of meditations on the tree is enough. Others feel a calling to plunge deeper, to glimpse the hidden face of the tree, the face that reveals the fractures of Shevirat HaKelim and the mission of Tikkun. When you return to the everyday world, consider how each sphere might manifest in your life. Does your work reflect the grounded stability of Malkuth, or do you neglect that at the altar of inspiration? Is your creativity fueled by Yesed's dreamscapes, or do you stifle your imagination out of fear? Do you run to Tiferet seeking beauty, forgetting that true harmony demands you balance mercy and judgment? Each sphere beckons you to ask, am I living this aspect of myself fully, or have I hidden it away? The tree of life isn't just a pretty diagram. It's an invitation to meet your own reflection in each sphere, to acknowledge both your light and your shadow, and to weave them into a tapestry that radiates outward. Rabbi Isaac Luria's vision in 16th century Safed reminds us that the tree is not a static picture in a dusty tome. It is a living presence that spoke to him, invited him to walk its paths and change the course of Kabbalistic history. Today you stand at that same threshold. You may not slip into trance as the Ari did, but if you open your mind and your heart, the tree will whisper its secrets. You might glimpse Tiferet's golden glow in a random act of kindness, or feel Keter's spark when you stand beneath the night sky. The tree's roads are always open, waiting for you to set foot upon them. In our next chapter, we will explore a symbol that fuses cosmic geometry with the union of opposites, the Sri Yantra, showing how 9 interlocking triangles can reveal the dance of Shiva and Shakti within you. But before we ascend further, take a moment to reflect on the tree. Which path called to you most strongly? Which sphere feels most urgent to explore? Because when you are ready, the tree of life will stand waiting, its branches reaching down into your life, its roots anchoring you in something far greater than yourself. When you've stood before the tree of life, traced its 10 glowing spheres and walked its 22 pathways in your mind, it's impossible not to sense that the universe speaks in geometry. From circles and spirals to webs of interlocking lines, sacred symbols map the unseen connections that bind all things. Yet some patterns reach even deeper. They don't merely mirror the cosmos, they pulse with it. One of those patterns is the Sri Yantra, a design so precise and enlivened that it seems to vibrate with the very essence of unity. While the tree pointed you toward a network of divine attributes, the Sri Yantra beckons you into the heart of duality itself, showing how the masculine and feminine, the finite and infinite, converge in a single burst of cosmic harmony. Imagine yourself in the early morning light of Ouroboros, an experimental township rising as a patchwork of cottages, temples, and gardens. In one open courtyard, bathed in dawn's pale glow, a life-size Sri Yantra is engraved on the stone floor. 9 interlocking triangles create a complex lattice, 4 point upward, reaching like arrows toward the heavens, 5 point downward, sinking into the earth's womb. At the very center, a single dot, the Bindu, simmers with the promise of everything and nothing. You can almost feel the geometry humming beneath your feet, as if the air itself carries a subtle vibration. This was the scene Sri Aurobindo and the mother envisioned when they placed their own Sri Yantra at the heart of their ashram in Auroville. They believed that meditating on this symbol would pull a seeker out of the endless loops of ordinary thought and thrust them into a direct encounter with the cosmic pulse. Yet the Sri Yantra is far older and more widespread than any one ashram. Its earliest known form appears in India's Vedic texts, where sages describe geometric patterns as a method to access hidden currents of consciousness. Generations later, Tantric adepts refined this design into the precise 9-triangle formation we recognize today. To the uninitiated, it might look like an intricate mandala or a complicated tiling pattern. But those who work with the yantra know it's a living gateway. Each triangle, each intersection, holds a field of energy, a microscopic snapshot of the dance between Shiva, pure consciousness, and Shakti, creative energy. By entering its geometry, whether through sight, touch, or meditation, a practitioner can feel those energies pulse within their own being, unveiling a unity that transcends thought itself. But how does geometry become more than decoration? How does a static engraving transform into a portal of experience? To answer that, we need to appreciate how every line in the Sri Yantra corresponds to a layer of reality. Picture the upward-pointing triangles as veins channeling the spark of Shiva's transcendent awareness, the downward-pointing ones as conduits for Shakti's immanent creative force. Where they intersect, 43 smaller triangles in total, are fields where those energies merge, each intersection a miniature universe of dynamic tension and harmony. At the very center, the bindu is not merely a black dot, it is the seed from which all manifestation springs, and into which everything ultimately dissolves. In other words, if the tree of life showed you the map of divine attributes, the Sri Yantra plunges you into the creative crucible from which those attributes originate. In 1955, when Sri Aurobindo and the mother laid down that massive Sri Yantra in Auroville's courtyard, they weren't seeking art, they were orchestrating an invitation. Devotees would gather before dawn, seated in silent rows around the engraved triangles. As the sun's first rays stretched across the stone, the mother would guide them. Gaze at the central bindu until all other shapes blur. Let your mind's chatter fade, until you feel a current moving beneath your skull, as if tapped into a river of light. Many reported waves of energy surging through their bodies, tingles at the crown, a burst of warmth in the chest, a sense of dissolving boundaries. Some claim to see colors not found on any spectrum, or to hear distant chimes resonating inside their skulls. Sri Aurobindo likened it to standing before a cosmic tuning fork. Strike the geometry with your attention, and your consciousness reverberates with a note that echoes across space-time. Yet for all its wonder, the Sri Yantra holds as many pitfalls as mysteries. The first is the temptation to treat it like a pretty illustration, a mural you admire but never truly engage. Many visitors to Auroville pause to photograph the yantra, noting its symmetry and complexity, then left without a second glance. They experience the design in their eyes, not their hearts. To tap its power, you need more than vision. You need intention. You must approach it as a living creature, one that demands respect and focus. It's the difference between watching a fire flicker from across the room and feeling its heat on your skin. The Sri Yantra's potency lies in that embodied attention. Another pitfall is misunderstanding the bindu as an end in itself. People often think, I'll meditate on the center and I'll slip into bliss. But the bindu is both a destination and a point of departure. It represents oneness, but also the infinite complexity hidden within oneness. If you fixate on it without exploring the interlocking triangles around it, you miss the dynamic interplay that animates the symbol. It's like staring at a star without considering the galaxy swirling around it. You might feel awe, but you won't comprehend the vast mechanisms that produce its light. Instead, you must let your gaze trace the lines. Follow the upward point of one triangle, then slide into the downward pitch of another. Notice how those paths intersect and separate, how each intersection creates a smaller triangle, and how those triangles nestle into one another in layers. In that weaving, you're invited to sense how unity emerges from multiplicity, not by suppressing complexity, but by embracing it. A more subtle obstacle arises when practitioners cling to technique as if it were a magic bullet. They memorize mantras, fixate on particular colors associated with the triangles, or insist on only meditating at dawn. None of these are inherently wrong. Sri Aurobindo's morning gatherings were powerful precisely because they blended geometry with sound, light, and group energy. But if you believe that skipping a sunrise visit means you've failed, you miss the point. The Sri Yantra's true teacher is the present moment. Whether you meditate at dawn, dusk, or midnight, whether you trace the pattern with your finger or simply hold it in your mind, the key is presence. Are you fully here? Are you open to feeling the tingle where Shiva meets Shakti? If your mind is elsewhere, planning dinner, replaying an argument, then you're simply wearing a symbol without surrendering to its living pulse. Perhaps the most common misconception is treating the Sri Yantra as a solitary venture. In Auroville, participants sat shoulder to shoulder, breathing in unison as the mother intoned Sanskrit sounds. That shared energy amplified the Yantra's field, like tuning a series of radio antennas to the same frequency. In solitude, the Yantra still works. Many practitioners keep miniature versions on their desks or dress their walls with printed posters. But the communal setting offers an accelerant. It's as if each person's focus strengthens the geometry's resonance until a collective heartbeat hums through the stone and into every participant. For solitary meditators, this means recognizing the invisible community that spans time and space. Every person who has ever held a Sri Yantra in reverence, from Himalayan yogis painting it on cave walls to medieval tantrics, inscribing it on copper plates. By visualizing that lineage, you align your practice with a stream of devotion that magnifies your own intention. So how do you bring the Sri Yantra into your everyday life? Start small. Print or draw a clear version, 9 triangles intersecting with perfect precision, on a sheet of paper. Find a quiet corner where you won't be disturbed and place the paper on a low table or the floor. Light a candle or softly glowing lamp so that the triangles catch and reflect light. Sit comfortably. Take a few deep breaths and allow your eyes to soften as they settle into the center bindu. Don't force your gaze. Let it relax as if you're looking through the symbol rather than at it. As the edges of the triangles begin to blur, pay attention to any sensations rising in your body. Maybe a subtle vibration in your forehead, a warmth at your throat, or a sense of expansiveness behind your eyes. That's the geometry speaking in your nervous system, reminding you that you are more than muscle and bone. You are a shimmering field of energy interwoven with everything around you. If you're drawn to movement, you can walk a small Sri Yantra path. A handful of temples in India etch a scaled-down version of the design into sand or pave it in stone. Penitents circle its outer triangles, following the pattern in concentric loops toward the center. Each step is deliberate. You move from the outer realm of form into the inner realm of essence. By the time you reach the bindu, your body and breath have synchronized with the yantra's geometry. It's a form of embodied meditation, a way to break free from hearing about unity and actually experience it through the cadence of your footsteps. In your daily routine, carry a small talisman, an amulet etched or printed with the Sri Yantra. When you find yourself lost in anxiety, racing thoughts about tomorrow's deadlines or tomorrow's worries, hold that talisman and let your fingers trace a triangle. Notice how the angle of your finger shifts, and let that shift carry your awareness from the chaos of thought into the precision of geometry. That single moment of focus can snap you out of distraction and anchor you in the pulsating field of the yantra. As you deepen your practice, you may discover that the Sri Yantra is not just a tool for occasional meditation, but a lens through which to see every moment as infused with sacred geometry. Notice the triangles in the rooftops of buildings, the interlocking beams on a footbridge, or the angles of light and shadow dancing on a wall. When you start to sense the underlying triangles, you realize that the yantra is both everywhere and nowhere. It's the pattern hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to recognize it. By engaging with the Sri Yantra, through sight, touch, movement, or visualization, you do more than admire an ancient design. You awaken a field of awareness where duality dissolves into unity, where the masculine and feminine energies within you move in concert rather than conflict. You begin to see that your struggles between will and surrender, reason and intuition, stability and change are echoes of the same cosmic dance played out in the yantra's geometry. And just as Sri Aurobindo and the Mother believed, meditating on this pattern can usher you into a state where those perceived oppositions merge, where you realize that every moment contains both roots and wings. When you return to everyday life, meetings, conversations, traffic, Instagram scrolls, you'll carry a subtle undercurrent of this revelation. Decisions may feel less forced. You'll notice how a simple choice can ripple through multiple levels of being, much like a shift in one triangle resonates across 43 others. Difficult emotions, grief, anger, fear may arise, but they'll pass through you faster, like a wave meeting a shoreline carved by millennia. And joy, quiet or exuberant, will land more fully, coloring your days with gratitude for the geometry that underpins it all. In our final chapter, we'll break down the steps to turn these symbols, from the Tree of Life to the Sri Yantra, into living allies for transformation. We'll examine how you can use pen and paper, movement and meditation, community and solitude, to make these ancient designs integral to your modern journey. For now, hold on to this. The Sri Yantra is more than a symbol. It's a map of unity within multiplicity, a reminder that every point you choose to focus on contains the whole. And in that realization, you may find that the boundaries you once believed separated you from the divine begin to dissolve, one triangle at a time. When you've walked the winding paths of the Tree of Life and felt the pulse of the Sri Yantra beneath your fingertips, the real journey begins. Integrating these ancient designs into your everyday life so that they become living companions rather than pretty pictures. Think back to the Camino de Santiago, where Paulo Coelho, then a struggling writer, stashed a small sketch of the Ouroboros in his pocket. That simple circle, that serpent clasping its tail, wasn't just an abstract doodle. It was a talisman, a reminder that life's obstacles are part of a grand loop, and that every ending curls back toward a new beginning. Coelho carried his Ouroboros like a compass. When fatigue or doubt crept in on his pilgrimage, he'd press the sketch against his chest and remember that his own story was part of an eternal cycle. That one symbol didn't just inspire him. It shaped the novel he would later call The Alchemist, a book about recognizing omens, following your personal legend, and understanding that the universe conspires to help you when you commit fully to the quest. So how can you turn symbols, whether the Ouroboros, the Tree of Life, or the Sri Yantra, into allies for transformation? It starts with a willingness to make them more than objects of admiration. You need to let them enter your daily rhythm, rising from mere eye candy into anchors you touch, draw, or meditate upon when chaos or confusion barges through. Begin by choosing one symbol that resonates most, perhaps the Ouroboros, if you've been circling the same career frustrations, the Tree of Life if you feel unbalanced between purpose and play, or the Sri Yantra if you long for a direct channel to creative inspiration. Print or sketch it in a size you can carry, sticker, talisman, or tiny notebook insert, and keep it within arm's reach wherever you spend most of your waking hours. When anxiety flares, before a big presentation or in the middle of a heated conversation, reach for your symbol. Hold it, trace its lines, and breathe. With the Ouroboros, feel how the circle closes in on itself, inviting you to recognize patterns rather than deny them. Ask yourself, What loop am I in right now? Is this argument a replay of one I've had before? Is this self-doubt an echo of a childhood insecurity? By naming the loop, you strip it of its power. You see it not as an endless trap, but as a cycle you can step out of, just as Coelho did on his pilgrimage when he realized that every twist of the path offered a new signpost. If you're working with the Tree of Life, use its 10 spheres as stations for self-inquiry. So imagine you have 5 minutes between meetings or chores. Close your eyes, take 3 steady breaths, and visualize the tree's base, Malkuth, rooting you in your body and surroundings. How grounded do you feel in this moment? From there, let your breath rise you to Yesod, the sphere of imagination. What dreams or intuitive nudges are whispering to you beneath the surface? Then shift to Tiferet, the heart sphere. What beauty or compassion can you access right now, either for yourself or for someone else? Continue moving through Hesed, love, Gevurah, discipline, Binah, understanding, Chokmah, wisdom, and Keter, the spark of the infinite. Even a fleeting mental journey through 3 or 4 spheres can recalibrate your perspective, like adjusting a lens that's been smudged and out of focus. The Sri Yantra, with its precise geometry, demands a slightly different approach, one that blends the visual with the physical. If you can access a printed or drawn version that's at least 8 inches across, place it on a low table in your quiet corner. Sit comfortably on the floor or a cushion so that the bindu, the central dot, is at eye level. Light a candle beside it if you can, because candlelight gives the yantra a living glow. Shadows dance across its triangles, making the lines feel as if they breathe. For your first session, allow yourself 5 minutes to gaze softly at the bindu. Let everything else blur. The edges of the triangles, the sounds in the room, even your own thoughts. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the geometry. As you practice, you'll sense subtle shifts, a tingle above your brow, a warming in your chest, perhaps a quieting of the never-ending mental chatter. Once you've built a little momentum, 2 to 3 sessions a week, experiment with a walking meditation if you find a larger Sri Yantra, engraved on a temple floor or a retreat center. Step slowly, placing 1 foot on each triangle in sequence, moving from the outer perimeter toward the bindu. With each step, imagine you're shedding a layer of ego or old habit. By the time you reach the center, you've not only mapped the geometry with your feet, but invited the symbol to map you from within. If walking isn't an option, simply trace the lines with your finger on paper. Follow the upward-pointing triangles and then the downward, noticing how your body's subtle micro-movements mirror the push and pull of Shiva and Shakti. No matter which symbol you choose, remember that consistency matters. Coelho didn't write The Alchemist on a whim. He lived his Ouroboros every day until its meaning infused his words. Treat your symbol as a ritual tool, a daily point of return. Place it by your bed so that when you wake, it greets you as a reminder to center yourself. Keep another copy at your desk, so that when inbox fury or project paralysis strikes, you can pause for a moment and trace the lines. Over time, these pauses accumulate. They create a network of brief, potent resets that undo tension before it hardens into frustration or burnout. But symbols aren't just private anchors. They also thrive in community. Consider forming or joining a small group of seekers who meet weekly to share insights. One person might lead a brief Tree of Life visualization. Another guides a Sri Yantra gazing session. Share what emerges. Did someone notice a previously unseen pattern in their relationships? Did gazing at the yantra spark a creative solution to a problem? Maybe someone else brought a fresh life to an overused meditation technique. In those gatherings, symbols become not only personal tools but communal mirrors, reflecting collective lessons and amplifying each person's experience. Of course, you'll inevitably hit roadblocks. There will be mornings when you fumble for your symbol and can't find it, or days when the geometry feels dull and empty, as if dust has settled on its meaning. When that happens, treat it as part of the process, not a sign of failure. Remember that symbols live in layers. Sometimes you connect with the surface. Sometimes you're tapping into deeper strata you haven't accessed before. If the Sri Yantra seems lifeless, maybe you need to revisit your intention. Are you meditating out of habit or out of genuine curiosity to feel union? If the Ouroboros feels too familiar, draw it anew with fresh attention, noticing how each loop you draw may differ slightly from the last. Each iteration can reveal new insights, like how your loops around self-doubt today aren't exactly the same loops you traced last month. When you persevere through those dry spells, something magical happens. You stop seeing symbols as static artifacts and start experiencing them as living, breathing guides. The tree of life begins to whisper when you feel misaligned, nudging you to move from Hesed's boundless giving into Gevura's disciplined action. The Sri Yantra hums in your bones, reminding you that every creative project, no matter how messy, is an opportunity to merge Shiva's insight with Shakti's drive. And the Ouroboros, once a drawing in your notebook, becomes a gentle hand on your shoulder, telling you that the frustrations you face are not dead ends, but part of a loop that, when fully embraced, can flick you toward a new beginning. So here's your challenge. Over the next 30 days, choose one symbol and weave it into at least 3 moments each day. Let it be your morning compass, your midday anchor, and your evening reflection. Take photos of where you place it, by your coffee mug, on your steering wheel, beside your laptop, and post them on social media with the hashtag #JayaLivingSymbols. Encourage friends to join you. At the end of each week, write a short journal entry. How did the symbols show up in your life? What cycles did you notice? Where did you feel the pull of higher spheres or the melding of divine energies? After a month, take stock. You may find that your habitual anxieties have loosened their grip, that your creative spark flickers brighter, or that moments of beauty and compassion, once rare, arise more frequently. Perhaps you'll realize that you've actually rewritten parts of your reality. You no longer see obstacles as dead ends, but as loops inviting a new response. Maybe you'll watch a friend struggle, and instead of rushing to fix things, you'll remember the tree's lesson to balance mercy with discipline, responding with both compassion and clarity. As I close this chapter, let me ask you, which symbol will you choose to carry as your ally, your guide, your living talisman? Will it be the Ouroboros that reminds you of life's cyclical wisdom, the tree of life that maps your ascent toward wholeness, or the Sri Yantra that pulses at the intersection of creative and cosmic energies? Whichever you pick, carry it with reverence, curiosity, and the daring to let it rewrite at least one corner of your reality. After all, the greatest transformation comes when we commit to walking with these symbols, not as distant relics, but as trusted companions on the uncharted path ahead.